The world doesn't reward virtue, it rewards perception. No matter how kind you are, someone will use that kindness like a ladder, climb up your back, and never look down. No matter how loyal you prove yourself, someone will mistake your consistency for weakness and test how far they can push before you break. And no matter how hard you try to see the best in people, the truth remains. People don't change, they reveal. Survival in this world doesn't go to the most honest nor the most forgiving. It goes to those who learn to see beneath the surface before it's too late. Those who understand that everyone wears a mask, and the mask is never removed in public. It's only slipped in private moments, in fatigue, in frustration, in repetition. Those who survive and thrive aren't the ones who trust easily. They're the ones who observe relentlessly. I call this skill behavioral forensics. Not mind reading, not intuition, not vibes. It's the disciplined study of patterns, the compulsive repetitions in speech, gesture, timing, and reaction that betray a person's true wiring long before their words do. It's watching how someone treats the waiter when they think no one's looking. It's noticing how they apologize, not in form, but in structure. Is it deflection, minimization, or genuine accountability? It's seeing how they react when their control is threatened, not with anger, but with silence that tightens like a noose. But before we go deeper, let me be absolutely clear. This isn't about becoming a manipulator. This isn't about weaponizing insight to dominate others. This is about immunization. You're learning to spot poison before you drink it, to detect the fault lines in a relationship before the earthquake hits, to stop handing your trust to people whose behavior has already warned you over and over what they're capable of. You're not learning to control people, you're learning to stop being controlled by them. And if you're ready to see the world and the people in it with eyes no longer clouded by hope or politeness, drop this in the comments right now. I see patterns, not promises. Now let's unlock the 9 behavioral keys that expose true nature. Not in theory, not in psychology textbooks. In real life, in real time, in your life. You're never fooled by the big lie. You're fooled by the exception. Someone snaps, yells, sends that venomous message, storms out, then comes back soft-eyed and says, "That wasn't me. Something came over me. Something came over me." And you believe them because it feels like a break in character, like a glitch in an otherwise stable system. But here's the brutal correction the world won't give you. There are no glitches, only patterns wearing disguises. Machiavelli once said, "He who believes what he wants to be true rather than what is true will soon suffer ruin." That's not philosophy, that's forensics. When someone insists that outburst wasn't them, what they're really saying is, "I don't want you to update your file on me." But behavior doesn't lie. Repetition does the talking. Think about the last time someone hurt you, then minimized it. They didn't say, "I lost control because I'm volatile." They said, "I was stressed, I was tired, it won't happen again." But go back. Rewind the tape 6 months earlier. Was there a sharp comment disguised as humor? A passive-aggressive silence after a minor disagreement? A sudden withdrawal when you asked for clarity? Those weren't anomalies, they were rehearsals. Most people wait for the explosion to confirm the danger. You wait for the whisper. Instead of asking, "Was that out of character?" ask, "How many times have I seen the prelude?" The jaw tightening before they speak. The way they deflect blame by reframing your feelings as oversensitivity. The way they apologize but never change the sequence. This doesn't mean you become paranoid, scanning every sigh like a threat. The key principle here is pattern density. 1 angry email could be stress. 3 angry emails spaced over 18 months with identical language, same trigger, same aftermath. That's not stress, that's wiring. What happens when you master this? You stop negotiating with ghosts. You stop saying, "Maybe they'll change this time." You start saying, "They've shown me who they are." 5 times already. Why would the 6th be different? Never use this to condemn on a single data point, but never ignore 5 data points, because the 6th came wrapped in regret. Remember, the exception isn't the truth. The exception is the truth wearing a better mask. People are flawless in the spotlight. They're fluent in charm when the camera's on. They remember your name when they need your signature. They're generous when generosity is witnessed. But true nature doesn't surface in performance. It leaks out under load. Machiavelli once said one must consider the final result of things, for some things that seem merciful lead to ruin, while others that seem cruel lead to security and well-being. What he meant is this: you don't judge a bridge by how it looks at dawn. You judge it by how it holds when the storm hits. Watch someone when their schedule collapses, when the flight is delayed and the gate agent says no more upgrades, when the Wi-Fi cuts during an important call, when their child has a meltdown in the grocery store. That's when the mask slips, not because they choose to drop it, but because maintaining it costs energy, and under load, energy goes to survival, not performance. Most people judge others in curated moments: coffee dates, job interviews, first impressions. They walk away thinking he's so calm or she's incredibly patient. But calm in a quiet room proves nothing. Patience in a controlled environment isn't patience, it's rehearsal. Instead, watch what happens when control is stripped. Does frustration turn inward? Quiet reflection or outward blame? Sarcasm, passive aggression? Does delay trigger problem-solving or victimhood? Does criticism land as data or as war? Think about your coworker who's always smiling in meetings, then you see them snap at the intern for a minor typo in a draft no one will read. Or your friend who posts gratitude journals online, but sighs heavily when her mother calls and says nothing important. This doesn't mean you stalk people, waiting for them to fail. The key principle here is selective attention. You don't need drama, you need friction, a missed reservation, a double-booked calendar, a forgotten promise. Those aren't emergencies, they're diagnostic tools. What happens when you master this? You stop being shocked by betrayal. You realize the person who yelled at the barista over a wrong order wasn't having a bad day. They were having a revealing one. Never mistake composure and comfort for character. Character is what's left when comfort is gone. Remember, light shows what people want you to see, load shows what they can't hide. You won't be discarded in one dramatic moment. You'll be erased in 1,000 tiny withdrawals, a delayed text reply that stretches from minutes to hours, then days. An eye roll disguised as a blink when you share an idea, a habit of interrupting just as you reach the point of your sentence. A laugh that lands half a second after everyone else's, like they're faking alignment. These aren't accidents. They're deposits in a quiet account of contempt. Machiavelli once said, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey present necessities that the deceiver will always find someone ready to be deceived." And the deception here isn't loud, it's cumulative. It's the slow erosion of your sense of belonging, until one day you realize you've been speaking to a wall for months and didn't notice when the plaster turned to stone. Most people wait for the insult, the betrayal, the cold shoulder. They miss the trail of breadcrumbs leading to the cliff. They think respect is binary, you have it or you don't. But in reality, respect leaks first in milliliters. Instead of asking, "Do they respect me?" ask, "How often do they acknowledge me? Do they remember what you said last week, or ask you to repeat it 3 times? Do they turn their body toward you in a group, or angle away like your background noise? Do they credit your idea in the meeting, or present it minutes later as their own insight? Think about the person who says, "I value your opinion," then never asks for it, or the partner who claims you're their priority, but consistently chooses work, friends, or scrolling over presents. The words say inclusion, the behavior says optional. This doesn't mean you become hypersensitive, tracking every sigh like evidence. The key principle here is consistency of disregard. 1 missed call is life. 3 missed calls followed by no explanation, followed by deflection when you mention it. That's design. What happens when you master this? You stop chasing validation from people who've already voted you out. You stop shrinking your voice to fit their attention span. You realize you weren't imagining it. The pattern was real. You were just taught to call it politeness. Never mistake surface politeness for genuine regard. Politeness can be performed. Regard must be sustained. Remember, the loudest rejection is rare. The quietest one is everywhere. And it always leaves footprints if you know how to read the ground. Kindness is not always generosity. Sometimes it's investment. Watch closely how someone gives, not whether they give, but how they give. Do they hand you coffee and say no big deal? Or do they hand you coffee and mention 3 days later how they skipped their break to get it for you? Machiavelli once said, "A prince ought to care more about being feared than loved if he must choose, but he should avoid being hated." What he understood, and what modern psychology confirms, is that perceived fairness governs loyalty more than affection, and nothing breeds resentment faster than kindness that comes with invisible invoices. Most people celebrate the gesture and ignore the ledger. They feel grateful for the favor and don't notice the follow-up text 2 weeks later. "Hey, remember when I helped you with that project?" Or the way a friend brings up your debt at the worst possible moment right before asking for something in return. Instead, watch the decay rate of their generosity. Real givers forget what they've given. Transactional givers archive it. Think about the colleague who covers your shift, then jokes about it being added to your tab. Or the family member who buys you a gift, then references it during an argument months later as proof of their sacrifice. Or the partner who says, "I've done so much for you," then lists it like a witness on the stand. This doesn't mean all reciprocity is toxic. Healthy relationships have rhythm, give and take, ebb and flow. The difference is in the tone of return. Does their giving feel like abundance spilling over, or scarcity being rationed? The key principle here is emotional bookkeeping. Some people keep ledgers in their heads, columns for favors owed, apologies pending, compromises made. They don't want you to owe them out of malice. They want you to owe them out of control. What happens when you master this? You stop feeling guilty for not repaying kindness that was never freely given. You realize their generosity wasn't a gift. It was collateral. Never confuse conditional generosity with care. Care gives without measuring. Control gives and watches the scale tip. Remember, generosity that needs to be remembered isn't generosity. It's currency, and you're not a friend. You're a debtor. The moment someone starts auditing your gratitude, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in a contract, and they're the only one holding the pen. Not every sorry is a repair. Some are just damage control, wrapped in softer syllables. An apology isn't defined by the word itself. It's defined by its structure, its weight, its willingness to occupy the full space of the harm. Machiavelli once said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, but if you cannot be both, then avoid being hated, and nothing breeds hatred faster than hollow remorse, because people forgive mistakes. They don't forgive being treated like the mistake was invisible." Most people hear sorry and relax. They take it as proof of care, as evidence the relationship is safe. But the untrained ear misses what the trained eye sees: the scaffolding beneath the word. Watch for the 3 telltale supports of a weak apology. First, the deflection, "I'm sorry you felt that way," shifts blame to your perception. Second, the minimization, "I'm sorry if I upset you," makes the harm hypothetical. Third, the condition, "I'm sorry, but you know how stressed I've been," turns accountability into negotiation. A strong apology has no exits. It names the act, "I spoke over you in the meeting." It names the impact. It made you feel unheard and disrespected. It names the change, "Next time I'll pause and ask if you are finished." Think about the last time someone hurt you and apologized. Did they linger in the discomfort, or did they rush to the resolution like it was a fire they needed to put out? Did they ask how you were doing days later, or did they act like the file was closed the moment the word left their lips? This doesn't mean you demand perfect language. The key principle here is emotional occupancy. Does their apology live in the wound, or just wave at it from the sidewalk? What happens when you master this? You stop accepting emotional ease. You realize their regret isn't about your pain, it's about their image. And you stop mistaking image repair for relationship repair. Never punish someone for imperfect wording, but never trust someone whose apologies all follow the same escape route. Remember, an apology that erases you isn't an apology. It's a reset button they're pressing, so you'll forget. And the next time it happens, you won't. Because now you read the blueprint, not the headline. You don't learn who someone is by who they praise. You learn who they are by who they permit others to disrespect. Watch how they react when someone beneath them in status stumbles, the intern who mislabels a file, the cashier who rings up the wrong item, the delivery driver who arrives 5 minutes late. Do they correct with calm clarity, or do they sigh, roll their eyes, make a joke at the person's expense, just loud enough for others to hear? Machiavelli once said, "A wise ruler ought never to keep faith, when by doing so it would be against his interest." And while that sounds cynical, what he's really pointing to is alignment of action and self-interest. People reveal their true value system, not in speeches, but in who they defend when there's nothing to gain. Most people judge character by how someone treats them. They think, "I'm being treated well, so they must be a good person." But that's not character. That's strategy. Anyone can be kind to someone they want something from. Instead, watch who they don't protect, who they let take the fall, whose time they treat as renewable, whose dignity they consider optional. Think about the manager who's warm and engaging in leadership meetings but ignores his assistant when she offers him coffee, or the friend who posts empowerment quotes online but mocks her sister's career choices in private. Or the partner who's patient with strangers but snaps at their child for spilling milk. This doesn't mean you expect sainthood. The key principle here is consistency of compassion. Respect that depends on utility isn't respect, it's calibration. And compassion that vanishes when status drops isn't compassion, it's performance. What happens when you master this? You stop being dazzled by charm directed at you. You realize their warmth isn't a trait, it's a tactic. And you start measuring people, not by how they make you feel, but by how they make the powerless feel in their presence. Never mistake selective kindness for moral depth. Depth shows up when no one's applauding. Depth shows up when the witness list is empty. Remember, the test isn't how they treat you when you matter, it's how they treat others when they think no one matters. That's not just insight, it's foresight. Because the person who disrespects the waiter today will disrespect you the moment your value dips tomorrow. The argument isn't where people reveal themselves. The aftermath is, in the heat of conflict, anyone can perform, shout, reason, cry, manipulate. But when the noise stops and the air thickens with unresolved tension. That's when the real choice appears: stay and repair, or withdraw and reset. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." And the fool waits for the other person to reach out first, while the wise one knows that silence after rupture is not neutrality. It's a decision in slow motion. Most people fixate on who started it, who yelled louder, who said the cruelest thing. They replay the explosion like forensic analysts, but they ignore the most telling evidence, the quiet that follows. Instead, watch what happens in the first 12 hours after the clash. Does the person return not to re-argue but to reconnect? Do they ask, "Are you okay?" Do they offer space without vanishing? Or do they go cold, radio silent, as if the relationship runs on autopilot until they're ready to re-engage? Think about the colleague who disagrees in a meeting, then finds you later to say, "I want to understand your side better," versus the one who avoids you for days until the next deadline forces interaction, or the partner who says we need to talk after cooling down, versus the one who acts like nothing happened until you bring it up, then says, "Why are you still upset?" This isn't about who apologizes first. It's about who holds the relationship as shared responsibility. The key principle here is relational gravity. Healthy people feel pulled back toward resolution. Unhealthy people feel pulled toward avoidance until the discomfort fades enough to pretend. What happens when you master this? You stop chasing ghosts after fights. You realize their absence isn't peace. It's abandonment disguised as patience. And you stop mistaking emotional withdrawal for self-care. Because real self-care includes caring for the bond. Never demand immediate reconciliation, but never ignore consistent disappearance. Remember, conflict doesn't break trust. Abandonment after conflict does. The storm passes for everyone, but only the trustworthy come back into the rain to help you rebuild the roof. The real emotion isn't in the moment, it's in the echo. When something happens, most people perform the expected response on cue. They smile when praised, frown when criticized, nod when interrupted. But those are reflexes, not revelations. The truth arrives later in the car on the way home. In the middle of the night, 3 days after the meeting, when they text out of nowhere. Machiavelli once said there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things, and emotional honesty is its own revolution. It rarely happens live, because live reactions are managed by the mask. Watch for the lag. The friend who seemed fine when you told them about your promotion, but 2 days later mentions how lucky you are, like it's a genetic accident. The coworker who agreed with your idea in the room then sends an email hours later with 10 passive-aggressive suggestions that rewrite it entirely. The partner who says, "Sure, no problem when you change plans," then spends the evening withdrawn, scrolling silently like a protest. No one declared. Most people trust the first response. They think if they didn't see anger, it wasn't there. But suppressed emotion doesn't vanish. It ferments, and it leaks in timing, tone, and topic shifts later. Instead of asking how do they react in the moment, ask what do they bring up after the moment has passed. Do they circle back with curiosity or correction, with warmth or weaponized memory? This doesn't mean you become a surveillance state in your own relationships. The key principle here is emotional latency. Authentic feelings take time to surface when safety returns, but resentment also takes time to sharpen, and the difference is in the intent of the follow-up. Is it to deepen understanding or to reassert control? What happens when you master this? You stop being blindsided by sudden coldness. You connect the dots between last week's event and this week's distance. You realize their neutrality wasn't acceptance. It was postponement. Never punish someone for needing time to process, but never ignore a pattern of delayed retaliation disguised as late reflection. Remember, the immediate reaction is the mask. The delayed one is the hand adjusting it, and sometimes the hand forgets to smooth the edges. Your evolution is a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see in it. When you change, when you set a boundary, when you heal a wound, when you succeed quietly or loudly, watch how the people around you respond, not in words, in reflex. Do they lean in with genuine curiosity, or do they subtly shrink your win to a fluke, a privilege, a temporary streak? Do they ask how you did it, or do they change the subject like your progress is an uncomfortable spotlight? Machiavelli once said, "One change always leaves a space for the entrance of another, and your growth is that change. It disrupts the old order. And people reveal their allegiance not to you, but to the version of you that served them." Most people assume support is static. They think if someone loved them at 25, they'll celebrate them at 30. But loyalty to a person is not the same as loyalty to their stagnation. Instead, watch for the quiet resistance. The joke that lands like a pinprick must be nice to have it all figured out. The sudden withdrawal of attention when you no longer seek their advice. The way they bring up your past mistakes right after you share a win, as if to say, "Don't forget who you were." Think about the friend who cheered when you got the job, but grew distant when you started earning more. Or the family member who praised your discipline until you stopped asking for their permission. Or the partner who said they wanted you to be happy until your happiness no longer required their presence. This isn't about jealousy as drama. It's about jealousy as recalibration. When your value rises, their leverage falls, and some people would rather dim you than adjust their grip. The key principle here is relational elasticity. Healthy bonds stretch with your growth. Toxic ones snap or constrict. What happens when you master this? You stop doubting your progress when others withdraw. You realize their distance isn't a sign you've gone too far. It's a sign they were only invested in the version of you that needed them. Never punish someone for struggling with your light, but never stay in a room that demands you turn it off. Remember, growth doesn't expose their hatred. It exposes their need for you to stay small. And the people who truly belong in your life won't just applaud your rise. They'll bring chairs for others to watch, because your ascent doesn't threaten them. It confirms their faith. You've just uncovered 9 behavioral signatures, subtle, repeatable, undeniable, that expose true nature long before betrayal, abandonment, or exploitation occurs. But knowledge without application is just entertainment, and you didn't come here to be entertained. You came here to arm yourself. So here's your assignment. Simple, specific, non-negotiable. Pick one of these 9 patterns. Just one. Watch for it, not in strangers, but in someone already in your life, someone you've trusted, someone you've excused. Track it for 7 days, not to judge, not to confront, just to see. Write down each occurrence, note the context, the trigger, the aftermath. Don't try to master all 9 at once. Mastery begins with one lens, sharpened until it cuts through illusion. And let me say this clearly, because power without principle is poison. This insight is not a weapon to dominate, it is a shield to preserve. You are not learning to manipulate. You are learning to detect manipulation, not just from others, but from your own hope, your own nostalgia, your own desperate need to believe the best. The world doesn't need more predators. It needs more unmanipulatable people. those who can stand in the center of chaos, see the game, and choose not to play, or choose to play differently. There are two kinds of people in this world: the manipulator, who sees others as instruments to be tuned for their benefit, and the unmanipulatable, who sees the tuning, hears the false note, and refuses to resonate. This path isn't about gaining power over others. It's about gaining power over your own attention, your trust, your loyalty. Because your trust is finite, your energy is non-renewable, your time is irreplaceable, and once given to the wrong person, it never comes back unchanged. So I ask you now, not as a teacher, but as someone who's been fooled, burned, and rebuilt, which kind of person do you choose to be? If this speech cut through the noise, if it felt less like advice and more like recognition, then do three things. First, hit like not for me, for the algorithm, so others who are tired of being used can find this truth. Second, subscribe and tap the bell, because next week we break down how to respond when you've seen the pattern without rage, without revenge, without self-betrayal. Third, and most important, comment below with which lesson hit hardest for you, and who in your life it reminded you of, not to shame, but to seal the insight, because awareness is the first act of sovereignty. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You don't need approval to withdraw your trust. You don't need an apology to walk away. Stay strategic. Stay ethical. Stay powerful.